break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Let us drink wine together on our knees. Let us drink wine together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Let us praise God together on our knees. Let us praise God together on our knees. When I fall down on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me.
Grace and peace to you from the one who was and is to come. Amen. Where light falls, the retreating night gathers even more densely. It was the theologian Jürgen Ebach who made me aware that the miracles of Jesus do not just evoke amazement and praise, but also panic and fear. For where light shows up, darkness is present with even greater intensity. In Luke's Gospel, for example, we read about the healing of a paralyzed man. When Jesus commands him to get up, take his mat and go home, the crowd responds with amazement, praise, and fear. And amazement seized all, and they praised God, and they were filled with fear, saying, "We have seen strange things today." Some translations speak about the crowd being filled with awe, but this is misleading. The Greek idiom phobos should be translated with fear, apprehension, dread, fright, panic, or dismay. The original Greek helps us to see that there is some ambiguity in the reaction of the crowd. And when the crowd talks about having witnessed strange things, some translations speak about remarkable things, but the original Greek reads paradoxa, which refers to something that is strange, unexpected, or paradoxical. Indeed, something can easily be lost in translation, but in this particular instance, we have to be more suspicious and ask ourselves, what goes missing when the crowd's reaction of fear, apprehension, dread, fright, panic, or dismay is silenced in favor of a more romanticized view of plain amazement and praise? The writer Jakob Michael Reinhold Lenz helps us to better understand the strange things the crowd has witnessed when he notes, where light falls, the retreating night gathers even more densely. To witness a miraculous healing is unsettling, especially when one witnesses that the light only falls on a few and the majority remains in the dark. We know that Jesus healed and resurrected only a few, and while the night retreated from those who were healed, it gathered more densely around those who were not healed and raised to new life. It is one thing to have come to terms with one's misfortune and to have accepted it as one's fate and destiny. It is another to suddenly witness that nothing and no one would have to stay the same, that radical change and healing is possible. It must have raised enormous expectations, which were soon disappointed. The joy of the one became the pain of the other. Why her and not me? Why only a few and not all? It was Jesus' teacher and friend John the Baptist who dared to raise those questions. Locked up in prison and facing a death sentence, he asked Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" We sense fear, dismay, panic, and disappointment. And Jesus' answer must have rubbed even more salt into John's wounds. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. John the Baptist must have wondered, if all of this is happening, why am I still in prison? He has the courage to raise a very uncomfortable and unsettling question, confessing his vulnerability and woundedness. Indeed, only those who stop wondering will be immune to disappointments. Those who wonder and ask questions find themselves stumbling. To witness a glimpse of light is to feel the presence of the night even more strongly. To witness someone else's healing and resurrection does not just evoke praise, but also intensifies the ongoing presence of the night. John the Baptist felt the darkness of prison and isolation, the fear of death even more strongly. Joy comes with the morning for those who experience healing, but for those still weeping in the night, the pain must be even harder to bear. For them, the night gathers more densely. And it does not help when those in darkness are blamed for not having enough faith. So often, victims suffer further victimization and spiritual abuse. But our Gospels do not try to resolve the paradox of miracles. They do not shy away from giving voice to both amazement and fear, praise and panic, gratitude and dismay. The season of Advent gives expression to what John O'Donoghue named the eternal longing at the heart of time. We're called to honor and respect such longing by not closing our eyes to the reality of pain or offering glib and pious answers. The crowd's ambiguous reaction and the question of John the Baptist speak to the nature of such longing, giving expression to both amazement and fear, praise and panic. The dread and dismay of those having to face the gathering night is not silenced in the Gospels. Their protest is what Caitlin Curtis calls grief in action. The Jewish theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel knows such grief when he says, "Words can only open the door, and we can only weep on the threshold of our incommunicable thirst after the incomprehensible." the artist Antoine José manages to hold the strange paradox of the falling light and the gathering night. Where light falls, the retreating night gathers even more densely. The news of Jesus' miracles raised the hopes of those desperately yearning for healing and change. But to the well-off and privileged, those at peace with the socio-political status quo, such news of radical transformation and healing must have been deeply unsettling and shocking. There were plenty of corrupt collaborators in Jesus' time who had managed to adjust to and even benefit from Roman occupation. And I'm not just talking about the local tax collectors who saw an opportunity to exploit Roman occupation for their own benefits. The party of the Sadducees, for example, had arranged themselves with the occupiers in a way that would secure their privilege and influence. They had the means and connections to do so. This explains the fear, dismay, and panic with which especially those in power responded to Jesus' miracles. They gathered even more densely to position themselves against the one who came to bring light. Every single miracle made a subversive claim. Not even those conditions considered to be unchangeable and final have to remain the same. No wonder then that after Jesus' resurrection of Lazarus from the dead, the religious authorities are said to have begun plotting to kill Jesus. Those who began to rock the boat were seen to be a threat to what the ruling party considered a beneficial arrangement. It is rather telling that resurrection was not part of the Sadducees' theology. Their desire for order and control could not tolerate something as uncontained and subversive as a belief in the resurrection. They had managed to package and box in God according to their agenda and interests. They made sure that there would be no surprise. But Jesus cast every healing as a small resurrection and a moment of insurrection. Nothing in no one would have to stay the same. To be raised from the deathbed, to be able to walk again, to see again, and to speak again was not just a matter of personal rescue and salvation. The personal is always political. Jesus' healings were deeply subversive, questioning the religious and political status quo. These miracles challenged the dominant purity system of the time, which divided people into sick and healthy, poor and wealthy, clean and unclean, righteous and sinful, honorable and outcast. Jesus kept challenging the system and its divisions with both his teachings and his miracles. He was deeply aware of how it left the majority of the population out in the cold. With every healing, Jesus rehearsed an insurrection. The health and dignity of those deemed outcasts was restored. Those considered lost and beyond restoration are brought back to life. They're back on their feet and back in town, knocking at the door to be let in. But there were some among the corrupt who allowed themselves to be moved by the glimpses of light they witnessed. They began to open not only their physical doors, but also the doors of their hearts to the deep longing for a homecoming. I'm thinking of Zacchaeus, the corrupt tax collector. Zacchaeus' moral compass was recalibrated by Jesus' desire to visit his home and to share a meal. It was Jesus' unconditional declaration of love that allowed him to recognize his own state of exile and to make an astonishing confession. Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Indeed, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Little did Zacchaeus know that he was counted among the lost, but he finally turned his face towards home. And Jesus' own resurrection became the ultimate insurrection against the deadly forces of oppression. For the troublemaker and rebel they thought was now removed and silenced for good returned. The one they considered a misfit, sentenced to death and cursed by God, surprised everyone with a comeback. Note how Mark tells us that the women at the empty grave were both amazed and trembling. And we're told that they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Again, amazement and fear, praise and panic are mentioned in one breath. And this is how the Gospel of Mark originally ended. As readers, we are once again confronted with these contrary emotions, this mixture of wonder and apprehension, joy and dread. Their journey to the grave was grief in action, which made them witnesses of a powerful and terrifying protest against those committed to gathering the night. The season of Advent celebrates the risen Christ as the Son of Man, the human one, the coming judge, who will make sure that the victims of history are not forgotten and not silenced forever. And those responsible for the plight of the forgotten will be held accountable. Such future promise invites us to read the present differently and to understand their grief as protest. According to the book of Revelation, the risen Christ and coming judge is already on his way in walking the streets of our town when he proclaims, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and we will share a meal together." Advent is grief in action. The future judge is knocking at our doors, longing to be recognized in those knocking at the doors of our hearts. Advent is grief in action. To share a meal with the human one is to share the gift of life in a way that all can live with dignity and in safety. Advent is grief in action. Every shared meal carries the promise of a much deeper transformation. We might overhear ourselves saying with Zacchaeus, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Just the thought of it might already make us tremble and withdraw in fear. The glimpses of newness and endless possibilities might be too scary to ponder, too unsettling to speak about. Advent is grief in action. The real challenge might not be our limitations, but the fear of the kind of power we receive to bring about change the moment we open our doors and let the human one in. But the risen Christ and coming Judge keeps knocking, waiting, longing to come in. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and we will share a meal together. Indeed, we can travel 1,000 miles in one line. We're always just one door away from home, although it may take our whole life to open that door. As you leave from here, may God bless you and keep you. Yes, may God bless you with somebody who will not stop knocking at your door. Amen.